I think, Rela, we will start with the introduction. I think people are getting admitted. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because we should also stick to the timing. People have
Yeah.
joined at the right time.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
We should not tax them.
Since it is truly a global forum, I'm not telling good evening. It's greetings to everybody because people have joined from across geography. Okay. This is Global Bankers Forum. We welcome you. This is the forum where banking professionals and other professionals from India and abroad, those who are working or having worked in different geography, cutting across private sector, public sector, cooperative bank, small finance bank, and NBFCs have gathered together. The idea is to share the best practices in each geography and each institution. The idea is everyone need not go and reinvent the wheel. Listening to the experiences and the pain points and how they have overcome in their geography and their institution. This is the primary objective of this Global Bankers Forum. And today we have chosen the topic Basel. Basel has been there for over a decade, and all of us, those who have been in the banking and those who are there now, they know about the transition, how we entered Basel 1, 2, 3, and then we are moving towards Basel 4. Is it that it is regulator driven or should banks themselves should look at it? That is the question now before everybody. Is it a regulator driven compliance or is it a business opportunity with so much awareness in the financial system? There is that we need not, we may anticipate in future clients may try to choose the bank they where they want to bank. Just I'll give you an example. We have many banks in India. I'm taking the example of India. Many banks with lot of liquidity with CASA percentage over 50%, but are not able to do business because of from corrective action imposition. Going forward, those clients who are there with such bankers may also start thinking, how do I choose my bankers? From that point of view, best international compliance, which our regulator is also following, Basel becomes a benchmark. Basel is not about only capital maintenance, but also about so many things. Nowadays, with Basel 4, it is more about liquidity, stability, and also capital and ability to do business with taking care of all types of risks. So it has become all the more important for the bankers, even from the reputation point of view, not only compliance, that we start looking at Basel compliance more seriously. And here to talk about this is Mr. Srinivasa Rella, who is a member of this Global Bankers Forum. He actually started his banking career in India with a public sector bank and then to private sector bank. And then he moved over to the technological side and he has been the solution provider and implementer from a person who is there in the bank to the moved over to the other side of the counter implementers because he understands the pain points and difficulties that are faced by the banks. His implementation experience again goes across the globe, right from Asia Pacific to Australia to US. I think he is the right person to enlighten. So the Global Bankers Forum thought it fit that we will invite such an expert to share his knowledge with all of us. And this will be the first in the series of Basel. Basel cannot be talked about in 1 hour. He will be igniting the candle today, depending upon how the light is thrown. The further sessions will be taken by Mr. Srinivasa Rella. Without wasting much time, I hand over the session to Mr. Rella. Rella, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know, I think the name itself is Global Banking Forum. So We have global, members across. So thanks, Kanan sir, for a great introduction. Hope I am audible to everyone, right? Can you see my screen also?
Yes, your screen can be
Yes.
seen and you are audible.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you. So the topic for today's discussion is demystification of Basel IV guidelines and practitioner's view. So we all know, I think in the banking, when I started banking theory and practice, now I believe we need to do Basel theory and practice. So that's why I think I want to actually give the practitioner's view about these Basel IV guidelines. I would like to clarify one thing upfront. There is nothing called Basel IV officially. This is a market kind name. The BCBS actually refers this as a Basel III post-crisis reforms. So that I think I want to make it very clear because there is a bit confusion. Where are these Basel IV guidelines? There are no Basel IV guidelines. This is a market kind name. BCBS actually refers this as a Basel III post-crisis reforms. So because I told it's a practitioner view, so I have an obligation to explain, I think, a bit of my experience, though I think Kanan sir has actually explained. I want to actually briefly touch upon that so that how I'm actually authorized to talk on this topic, I want to explain that. Almost I have 10 years of experience in Canara Bank. I started my career with as a credit manager. Then I moved to Lakshmi Vilas Bank, where I was playing the role of an assistant general manager in integrated risk management. Actually, at that time, I realized the importance of a data science and even the technology. They are integral part of the risk management. At least in my view, without that, I think we cannot actually play the role of a risk manager, an effective role. Like that is the reason consciously I left, I think, banking sector and I joined the Oracle. Oracle, there I got, I think, ample opportunities to work with the wide spectrum of banks. Worked with small banks like Equitas, big private sector banks like ICICI, HDFC, global banks like National Australian Bank, Credit Suisse, GE Capital, Regions, Wells Fargo, TD Bank, and so on. A big list, I think I have worked it. As a director of the Basel applications at Oracle, I had the great opportunity actually to design and develop the software applications for capital adequacy based on Basel IV, including the other aspects like leverage ratio, large exposures, liquidity coverage ratio, and many regulatory reports for multiple jurisdictions. I had great opportunity there at Oracle. Academically, I am qualified risk professional from GARP with a firm certification. Also, I'm a CFA chartered from CFA Institute USA. Along with that, I actually acquired the PMP certificate, the project management professional from PMI Institute USA. The latest trend, if you see, I think how I think all the technologies are being implemented is the agile methodology. So I also got certified from the agile methodology. Even I had the practice and working experience in implementing solutions in the agile methodology as well. With this background, I would like to demystify the Basel guidelines and present my views as a practitioner. In the first session, as Kanan sir has actually told, effectively, I will be introducing all the components of the Basel and the rules of the game, how we actually need to implement the Basel. And we shall discuss the details of each component in the subsequent sessions if people show interest. I have few disclaimers before actually jumping onto the agenda. I am conducting these sessions on my individual capacity, and I'm sharing just my personal views on these guidelines. None of these views can be attributed to my organization's approach to Basel. So I want to make this loud and clear. I would like to confine in explaining what these guidelines are, why these guidelines, when do we need to implement, and how we need to implement also. This is how I think I want to actually cover the entire topic of the Basel. We can have separate sessions when actually RBI starts its consultation regarding the applicability of some of the clauses in these guidelines and what should be the role of RBI. So I want to reserve those topics for a separate sessions. But here, let us talk about what, when, how, and why. That's what I think I want to actually touch upon. And in the interest of the group at large, I might be talking some of the very basic concepts initially. I have no option except to talk the basics of what is the Basel, all those things. I know it is a bit of taxing to the risk professionals, but let us, I think, take the interest of the group at large. That's why I'm doing it. And again, one more thing, I want to say that I'm discussing the BCBS guidelines and not the RBI guidelines, not jurisdiction specific guidelines. I'm taking the parent guidelines directly from the BCBS and I'm actually trying to discuss. Okay, with this, let me, oh, one moment. This is where, oh, Chinu, this is, Chinu, okay, introduction. This is very sensitive, the screen. Okay, okay, I can use this one. Okay, so let us see what is that, the agenda. This is a very big topic, as you all know. So for our convenience, I grouped the agenda into three broad groups, namely the introduction, then high level overview of the Basel guidelines, and the adoption of the Basel guidelines. Within each agenda item, we have subtopics. So in the first introduction topic, what we can discuss is what are Basel guidelines and what are IFRS guidelines and how they are actually interlinked. That's very important. We should know. The second thing is, as Kannan sir has actually told this one, is it an opportunity or it's a just mere regulatory obligation? So I think we need to understand, because understanding and having a perception on this actually changes our approach to implementation. That's why we need to actually have an understanding, is it really an opportunity or an obligation? Then thirdly, we should know when is the time for adoption, because if you know well in advance, you can actually prepare well and seamlessly implement. That is the reason I think we need to know that. This is what I want to cover in the first agenda item, introduction. Then in the high level overview, we let us do a deep dive into what is this evolution of these guidelines, the Basel 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I'm sure, I think before I retire Touchwood, I think we will see definitely the Basel 5 guidelines also. So let us understand how these guidelines are actually evolved over a period of time and why they are. Then the key reforms, right? I think in 1, 2, 3, and 4, what has actually been changed? We need to understand why they are changing also, we need to understand. So then I think we need to do the key prudential metrics. Reason is whether it is B1, B2, B3, and B4, whatever may be it, they are actually talking about very few, I think, components, the key metrics like capital adequacy ratio, leverage ratio, TLAC, LCR, something like that. So let us try to understand what are the key metrics they're actually talking, and even the subcomponents of that. This actually gives a good understanding for us at the time of implementation and adoption to our business. And the last one is in this agenda item, I want to actually give a one snapshot view of B2, B3, and B4. We all know that the different banks are at different stages, right? I know, I think in India, some cooperative banks and small banks are adopting the B2 guidelines, and most of the other banks are in B3, and now they are gearing for the B4 also. So I want to give a one single snapshot wherein you can see how these actually, what is that, what are the different delta changes between B1, B2, and B3. So that I want to cover in one agenda item. Then last agenda item, most important, maybe I think I will just introduce this topic, what is that, today's session. Maybe at a later point in time, we can actually do a deep dive. Here I want to actually explain the real challenges in the adoption of these guidelines. Then I want to, what is that, earlier I was wearing the hat of what is that, even as a vendor, I used to sell, I think, the Basel applications for Oracle to all the banks, but I don't want to recommend any solutions, but I want to actually give a guidance on what key features you need to actually look into in the technology vendors, because there are so many vendors, basket of applications are available. The banks are really getting confused what to actually pick. So instead of saying which application you need to buy, I will say which features you need to look into the applications. Hope that will be definitely useful. And let us get into the Q&A. Maybe I think in the chat window, you can actually put the questions, and my colleague, Mr. Ramesh, will be taking a log of all these questions. We will try to answer all these questions. If not, we can definitely come back to you in the, either in the next sessions or in the, what is that, we can actually, what is that, send the responses through email also. Chino?
You are on mute, sir. Rellas. You are on mute.
Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So let us see what is this. Okay, I need to use this one. Okay. Okay. So the Basel guidelines, let us, I think, try to understand. Whenever we discuss the Basel guidelines, we hear the words BIS, BCBS, Basel Accords. So let us understand what are they. BIS stands for the Bank for International Settlements, and the BCBS stands for the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. This is the body which actually issues the Basel guidelines. BIS supports the BCBS, but they are two different entities. BCBS houses in the BIS office at Basel, Switzerland, but these two are two different entities, and BCBS is actually publishes these guidelines. And the Basel guidelines are the voluntary guidelines, but becomes mandatory once the respective regulator adopts and issues its guidelines. For example, the Basel IV guidelines, BCBS has already published it in December 2017, but no regulator has actually yet to adopt. So BCBS guidelines are voluntary guidelines, but once the respective regulator adopts them and gives, then it becomes mandatory. So we need to understand that difference as well. So the main objective of these Basel guidelines is to strengthen the global banking system by monitoring various aspects of the banking, including the capital adequacy, liquidity, operational resilience, and so on. There are many other factors which actually being monitored through the Basel metrics. Coming to IFRS, IFRS stands for the International Financial Reporting Standards. These are the guidelines for preparing the financial statements. I can say this is a global language for accounting. These guidelines are issued by IASB, International Accounting Standard Board. We need to understand one thing. Basel guidelines are specifically for banks, whereas IFRS guidelines is applicable to any entity which actually draws the financial statements. Within IFRS standards, there are 20 plus standards. There are 3-4 standards which are applicable for the banks, like IFRS 9, 7, 10, and 12. These are the, I think, 4 standards which are generally applicable for banks. Within that, I want to actually, pick the IFRS 9 because it is having a direct relation with the Basel. So I want to actually pick an IFRS 9, which actually deals with the accounting of financial instruments. Even IFRS 9 also is having 3 important components. The first one is the classification and measurement of financial instruments, then impairment of financial statements, and hedge accounting. For impairment of financial assets, banks are having an obligation to compute the provision amount. Till IFRS 9 comes into play, we have been doing the provision computation based on the incurred loss methodology. IFRS 9 is actually introducing a new methodology called expected loss methodology. So IFRS 9 is for the provision computations, at least from our perspective and our context, we need to understand this. Again, these guidelines are voluntary guidelines unless it is adopted by the respective regulator. As you know, I think there are nearly around 120 countries which are actually accepted and adopted the IFRS guidelines. But the one exception, as usual, USA has not actually adopted IFRS 9 guidelines. They are still strictly following their own US GAAP for their accounting. That's an exception. So how these two are related for us, that's very important, right? Knowing, I think, these two on standalone basis is fine. But let us see in the graph, you have the loss, the distribution curve. There are 2 important components. One is the expected loss, another is unexpected loss. Expected loss means it's a business loss, what you are going to expect when you actually get into any business for that matter. For example, if you are sanctioning around 100 home loans, definitely there will be, based on our experience, we can say there are 2% of the loans may go bad, 2 to 3%, right? It may go bad. Which 2 will go bad? I think if you know upfront, we will definitely not, finance those 2 things, but we will not be knowing that, but we will be numerically saying that some percentage will go bad. That is what is the expected loss. So for the expected loss, we are obligated to make provision. For provisions, you have the IFRS 9 prescription to compute that. That's how I think you need to read it. Now, if you see the second part and the most important part of the loss distribution curve, it is the unexpected loss. Means it is beyond our expectation what may go wrong. So for those components, you are supposed to keep the capital in place. So how do you compute capital? It is always depending upon the riskiness of the assets. You need to actually measure the riskiness and keep the capital aside. That's what it is. So how do you measure? That's what I think the Basel guidelines is all about. Whether it is 1, 2, 3, 4, or in the future 5, finally they are going to give the what is that the how do you measure the capital for the assets? That's how I think the Basel is supporting the loss distribution. What is that curve? So from the solution point of view, what you need to understand is in the below diagram, I have given the solution, right? I think the bank database, bank, what it takes is the all the assets and its mitigation means the collateral and other some, what is that, bank structural dimensions like your line of business and branches, the products, all those things, that information will be taken and you are going to compute the provision amount. Understand that this is important. The same data is required even for Basel applications also, but there is one additional information that is required for Basel is the provision. So the IFRS 9 application is going to, the output is the provision, that is an input for Basel application. So whenever you are actually designing these type of solutions, you need to have this understanding, because let me tell you one thing, most of the money in implementation of the Basel application, you will actually invest in the data movement only. So that I can say, I think maybe at least 70% of the money on your Basel adoptions will go only in the data movement and the data, what is that, transfer from one system to another system and data governance. That's why I'm saying this is very, very important. Okay, now let me move on to the next slide. The adoption of the Basel guidelines. Is it an opportunity or an obligation? Okay, so we have already discussed. Basel is always, I think, giving some prescriptions to compute our capital, nothing more than that. In a simplistic sense, I can say. So why do we need to actually, what is that, compute capital? Why do we need to measure, what is that, the risk? That's because if we decide not to measure the risk, then there is no need of adoption of the Basel guidelines. I can't think of any other, what is that, example in this pandemic, the COVID itself, right? I think we all agree and we have experienced it since more than 1 year. I think we are in a severe pressure because of the COVID. In COVID management, everyone is, I think it has been established now, 3 T's. You need to test, you need to track, and you need to treat. If you apply the same analogy for our banking portfolio, what you need to do is you need to measure the risk, you need to monitor the risk, and you need to manage the risk. If you agree that, what is that, testing is so more important in COVID management, equally you need to, I think the same, what is the importance you need to give for measuring the risk in your bank portfolio. So now I think if you agree that, I think measuring is very important, then how you are actually using that measured risk? You can actually, what is that, if you know that the advantage is you can actually price your products very precisely, because all our, what is that, our price is nothing but your interest rate. So while fixing the interest rate, if it's more risk, I think you need to charge more. But unless you know what is the risk, how do you charge? So that's very important. The second is removing the biases in the banking, lending, and investment activity, where you need to actually, what is that, put your entire money, right? I think the deposits, whatever you're mobilized, you need to invest either in banking book or in trading book. That's all right. I think risk-adjusted return on investment is the, I think, the final rule. So apart from the mandatory, what is that, investments, what we need to do it in CRR and SLR, that anyhow, that's an obligation. But in general, I think this will actually guide you. The moment you measure the risk-adjusted return on investment, then that is a guiding force for you to, what is that, investments and appropriate portfolio management in sync with the risk appetite. Maybe this, I think I want to definitely explain. We all, I think, actually defining our risk appetite at the bank level. But if you see the sophisticated banks or advanced bank, they actually define the risk appetite at the highest level. Finally, it is coming to the line of business level, product level. Trust me, it is actually going to the business operating unit level. Even I think it is actually fixed at an employee level also. So he cannot operate more than that risk appetite. So that's how I think the what is that, the sophistication of the advanced banks, they're actually using this risk appetite. So you need to manage your portfolio within the bank's risk appetite defined. Then optimizing risk management efforts. You can't, I think, manage all the, what is that, your portfolio equally, right? I think if it is less is the risk, I think you need not pay so much attention to that. But if it is risk is more, you need to monitor very closely. So you need to have the optimized risk management efforts. Then improving the efficiency of the organization. Finally, what we all want is, I think, improve your, what is that, the bottom line in a sustainable manner. For that, risk is important. Can I live without taking a risk? That's what I think. Then the question comes, because if there is a risk, you have no option except to measure the risk. But can I live without taking a risk? Absolutely you can't, because the banking business itself is built on the risk itself. You are taking money from someone else and giving the same money to someone else, I think, in the form of loans. So our business itself is built on risk. So we have no option except to be in the banking business, you need to continue to take risk. But you have no option at the same time, without, you can't continue the business without measuring the risk precisely. If you accept all these things, then regulatory, what is that, compliance is just, what is that, incidental to our business. That's all. It is not an obligation anymore. It is absolutely a business opportunity. So how we actually, what is that, percolate this idea to the entire organization lies, I think, with the top management. Now, coming to the Basel IV guidelines and the implementation progress, this is extracted directly from the BCBS. I did not manipulate anything or synthesize this information. BCBS actually monitors every 6 monthly how these guidelines are being adopted across the globe. They actually monitor and they used to publish it. This is 6 months back one. I have taken, what is that, the report, and I'm presenting only for the India, USA, and EU jurisdictions, but they publish for all the jurisdictions. So let me explain you, especially what is that, and how do we read this? Okay, 1 means there is no guidelines. 2 means draft guidelines are released. 3 means final guidelines are released, and 4 is final rules are in force. Green is adoption is completed. Yellow is adoption is progress. Red is adoption is not yet started. So if you see, these are the Basel IV, I think, different components. Okay, the BCBS deadline. This is what has been agreed by all jurisdictions as a group, because BCBS is having members from all the, what is that, 28 member countries. All the central banks are part of, they are the members in BCBS. They came to a consensus and they agreed these deadlines. So generally what happens is the group decision will be adopted by the member countries. Now, my focus is only, if you see the white boxes, I think the revised standardized approach, all those things, the ones. So BCBS has actually published the Basel IV guidelines, the so-called Basel III post-crisis reforms, in December 2017. But the consultation has not actually started by any regulator. But as per my information, Q3 of this year, you are going to see definitely the consultation, because you don't have much time left out. Initially, BCBS has started with 2022. Because of the COVID, they have given one more, what is that, 1 more year optional. So now it is 23. Now, I think the last week also I was actually seeing some reports from the US Fed. They are preparing for consultation in Q3 of this year itself. So Basel IV is not far off. It is definitely, I think we should be preparing well. So now let me move on to the next slide. The evolution of the Basel. So I think the Basel 1, 2, 3, 4, what is this? So Basel 1 is actually, what is that, 3 decades back, I think it has been published in 88. It is having only one pillar, the minimum capital. That is the only one pillar Basel 1 is having. It is also addressing only one risk called the credit risk only. The other 2 risks like market risk, operational risk, and many other pillar 2 risks also not a part of Basel 1. And the computation of the, what is that, the Basel 1 credit risk is also at a balance sheet level, means at a portfolio level, they're actually taking some, what is that, portfolio, a thumb rule methodology they adopted, Basel 1. I am sure, I think no bank is in Basel 1 at this point in time. Everyone has moved to B2 or B3. Coming to the B2, this is, I think, a real, I think, big leap in, I think, the regulation, especially from the capital point of view. They brought in 3 pillar approach. We all know, I think the pillar 1 is minimum capital, pillar 2 is the supervisory review, and pillar 3 is the public disclosures. So in pillar one means within minimum capital requirement, I think we are required to address all the three risks: the credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. And the computation granularity also, it is getting refined. Means I think as you evolve the guidelines, the sophistication in even computation is also is being demanded. So now in B2, the computation is at the asset class granularity or risk type granularity. When you move to the Basel 3, now Basel 3 is actually focusing on the numerator part of the capital adequacy ratio. I'm sure I think you all will be knowing what is a capital adequacy ratio. It is nothing but a ratio of capital to the risk weighted assets. So Basel 3 has actually focused its attention on the numerator part of the CAR ratio. Means they are focused mainly on the quality and quantity of the capital. Incidentally, they also addressed the liquidity problem also, that anyhow we can see in detail later. So that is what is the Basel 3 is all about. And they also addressed the counterparty credit risk part, which is not clearly what is the addressed in Basel 2. So that's what is the Basel 3 is all about. Now let me go to the Basel 3 post-crisis reform, which is nothing but I think we are referring as a Basel 4. In Basel 4, they actually focused on the denominator part of the capital adequacy ratio. Means they actually focused their energies in revamping the entire the capital computation for credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. Do expect significant changes in the way they are computing what is that credit risk, market risk, operational risk. In between, we have, I think, a very significant guidelines called BCBS 239, the risk data aggregation. At least with my experience, I can say that no bank has actually in toto could able to adopt BCBS 239. This is mainly talking about your data governance, data quality. How do you actually establish the data lineage from report to the input data? This is huge, and it has come out with a lot of, I think, principles how we are supposed to do the risk data aggregation. All along, we are talking about the corporate governance, fine, but BCBS is talking about your data governance, very, very important. Now, to summarize all these B1, B2, B3, B4, whatever may be it, what is being happening is they're actually enhancing the scope of risk coverage. Started with credit risk, now with credit risk, market risk, operational risk, IRBB, liquidity risk, reputation risk, so on, right? And the second thing is they're actually refining the grain of the computations. Means they are actually bringing more and more sophistication in what is that bringing. And one good news I can definitely tell in Basel 4 is very, very important. All along, I think regulators and all these, what is that, highly developed, sophisticated banks are thinking that they are actually migrating from standardized to advanced approaches. But Basel 4 is putting a lot of restrictions on the advanced approaches, and they're actually penalizing the what is the advanced approaches banks. They are not going to derive any more capital benefits in the Basel 4 by adopting the advanced approaches. So it is very, very good for the standardized banks, and every bank is pushed back to the standardized approach. Okay, that is the regarding the evolution. Now, key prudential reforms. I want to take B2 as a base, and we can actually see what is B3 and B4 and what are the key changes. I don't want to go deep into that. B3 has come on account of 2008 financial crisis. In the financial crisis, we all realized that the capital what banks have maintained is not a quality capital. As against 8% of the capital adequacy ratio, BCBS always says 8%, but RBI, I think it's 9%. Officially, unofficially, RBI always insists around 12%. But against that, in most of the banks, means the so-called advanced banks have actually maintained only 2% of the capital. Means they did sufficient financial engineering and avoided to maintain any capital. Because of that, the 2008 crisis, the Basel 3 guidelines have been published. At the same time, I think solvency is not an issue. Actually, liquidity is also one of the major issue in 2008 crisis. To address these two things, Basel 3 guidelines have come. So Basel 4 has come because you will be surprised to know Basel 4 guidelines have been published because there is inconsistency in RWA computation across jurisdictions and within the jurisdiction across the banks, because there is no reliability on what RWA is being computed by what is that different banks. That is the reason Basel 4 has come into play. That's how I think the reasons, if you think of Basel 3 and Basel 4. Now let us see what component has been changed in B3 and what component has been changed in B4. So the first one is the increase the level of quality of capital. As I told, I think what is that? The quality of capital has been enhanced by dropping the tier 2 and redefining the tier 1 and tier 2 capitals. And even they brought in the concept of CET1 capital, and they increased the even the numbers also. 8% they kept it in car, but the tier 1 capital requirement has gone up to 6%, and within that CET capital ratio should be 4%. Like that they have done it, and they brought in for global systematically important banks some additional, what is that, car ratio also in the form of leverage ratio, or even the while limiting the pro-cyclicality, like your counter-cyclical buffer and capital conservation buffer. All in all, what I can say is there is a huge focus on the numerator part of the capital adequacy ratio in B3. Now, there is nothing, I think in Basel IV, they did not touch anything regarding the capital. Now, if you see the second point, the enhanced risk capture. So in B3, they just touched only the counterparty credit risk instead of, what is that, in case of counterparty, we have two components called, one is called migration risk, another is the default risk. Default risk is already in B2, but in B3, they actually addressed the migration risk of our derivative portfolio. That's why I think they introduced the credit valuation adjustments. That's all. I think nothing much. Then asset value correlation and market risk, they actually enhanced to capture even 12 months market stress in B3. But if you see the Basel IV, they actually revamped the entire methodologies for credit risk, market risk, operation risk, and they penalized, as I mentioned, they penalized, what is that? They put a lot of restrictions. Let me state in that fashion. Lot of restrictions on advanced approaches. For some portfolios, you can't even use the advanced approaches, and they put the output floor. Finally, what I can say is in Basel IV, the advanced approaches banks, they cannot derive any more capital advantage. Even if they derive some capital advantage, that may not be in tune with the investments what they are making. Very clearly, I can state that. Then the other important thing is the leverage ratio. Leverage ratio has been brought in as a part of B3, and that has been enhanced, means an additional leverage component has been introduced in B4. Leverage ratio, we can actually see what is that in the next slide. Liquidity. So we all know, I think during 2008 crisis, all the banks were solvent, but very few banks are liquid. So to address that that portion, they brought in two metrics: liquidity coverage ratio and NSFR, net stable funding ratio. One is for short-term liquidity, another is for the long-term liquidity. I know, I think we all have some wrong notion saying that ALM is actually solving this problem. ALM actually provides all the information that is required to compute the LCR and NSFR. It provides, but there is what is that, some additional computations are required. So don't expect that your ALM solution is actually going to compute your LCR and NSFR, but ALM is going to provide all the required information for LCR and NSFR computation. That much I can say. So these are the high level, I think, key prudential, what is that, changes. Now, let us see what are the metrics, because we understood what is B1, B2, B3, and we understood what is the rationality. But what they are actually dealing with, only 3, 4, I think, the metrics, nothing more than that. The first one is the capital adequacy ratio. We are all familiar with this. Tier 1, Tier 2 by, I think, risk-weighted assets. That's what is the metric. And coming to the leverage ratio is a Tier 1 cap. It is a ratio between Tier 1 capital to the average gross measure. Let me, I think, in a simple manner, I can say leverage ratio is a, what is that, an add-on to the capital adequacy ratio. It substitutes, it provides additional information, and it is an average ratio. It is not a point in time ratio. For example, capital adequacy ratio, you actually compute at a point in time, because risk weighted assets you are taking on a point in time, means 31st March or September 30th, something like that. But in case of leverage ratio, you need to take the 3 months average gross measure, and it is a non-risk measure, means you need not do, I think, any, what is a mitigation adjustment of the collateral, that is not required. So leverage ratio is mainly introduced to contain the off-balance sheet. Many, I think, advanced banks have actually built a lot of off-balance sheets, and they escaped for maintaining the capital adequacy ratio. That is the reason leverage ratio has brought in place, mainly to contain the off-balance sheet build of assets. And large exposure. This is nothing new. Again, it is a credit concentration risk for a single counterparty. And we have been, I think, practicing all these things. This is tier one capital to the net exposure measure of a counterparty or a group of connected counterparties. It looks very simple, but it is not simple. This is the most difficult task which all the banks are struggling to do it. Let me tell you why. So the word connected counterparties, in from I think we what is that we know I think how there are a lot of I think there are a lot of rules to establish connectedness between two counterparties. It may be control relationship or economic interdependency or maybe financial consolidations. It is so exhaustive to establish the party-party relationship, and in capturing all this information in a system is more than a challenge. And many banks are actually literally struggling to implement this simple what is that manually. It is easy, but when you look at from a system point of view, it's more than a challenge. That is what is the large exposures. In US, the same thing is referred as a SCCL, the single counterparty credit limit. They are one and the same. From the Basel point of view, these are the large exposures. Any exposure more than 10% of a tier one capital of a bank is referred as a large exposure. Then liquidity coverage ratio. This is a short-term liquidity. Banks are required to maintain the high-quality liquid assets to their total net cash outflows within a 30 days period under stress condition. Anyhow, I think in ALM, the first four buckets, that's what is actually communicating the same message, but they brought in some additional, how do we stress all those things? That is the only thing. So ALM actually provides all the information, but you need to have a separate solution for LCR and NSFR. So these are the key metrics. Now, this is what I think I want to actually explain you. Maybe it looks very complicated, but it is actually not. So let me explain the color coding first. The purple component, the square purple are the new components or new methodologies in the Basel IV. And the purple circle is modifications in the existing methodology in the Basel IV. These are with reference to Basel II, because Basel II is the base for us and see what are the changes we have done in Basel III and Basel IV. Basel III changes are new methodologies in Basel III have been, I think, highlighted in yellow. So yellow and purple will give, I think, the real indication. If it is white, there is no change. So Basel II, Basel III, and Basel IV are one and the same. That's all I think. That's how I think you need to look at it. And the brownish, you need not worry. I just use it to highlight the different metrics. That's all. Let me start with the top line, the large exposure, the credit concentration I told, right? The SCCL, it has been introduced only in Basel IV. And the leverage ratio, it is already introduced in the Basel III, but some modifications by bringing additional leverage ratio for GSIPs has been introduced in B3. And capital adequacy, we are going to discuss in depth. TLAC is, I think, this is mainly for the total loss absorbing capacity, mainly for GSIPs. I don't know, there might be a different version of TLAC in Indian banking systems. That's why I think I'm not focusing much. It is mainly for the GSIPs and liquidity measures. As I explained in the LCR and NSFR, which have been introduced in the Basel III. Now, in case of capital adequacy ratio, if you see, there is a capital component which is generally used everywhere, but still, I think logically I grouped it under capital adequacy. You have credit risk, market risk, and operation risk. Within capital, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. This is what is Basel II says. But in Basel III, the tier 3 capital has been dropped off. They are not going to recognize the tier 3 capital for anything. In Basel II, tier 3 capital is being recognized for market risk only to the extent of 1.25% of the risk-weighted assets, something like that. T1 and tier 1 and tier 2 has been refined a bit, the nomenclatures and the eligibility conditions in Basel III, but nothing has been changed in Basel IV. Now, if you look at the credit risk, within credit risk, I can think of, I think there are three important portfolios. You have the derivative portfolio or non-derivative portfolio. Within non-derivative portfolio, you can segregate into securitization portfolio and non-securitization portfolio. Indian banks, I don't think, I think you have, I think, a lot of securitization portfolios. So you need to actually look at only non-securitization. If you look at the non-securitization portfolio, the credit risk computation, Basel II and Basel III, there are not much changes. They are almost same. Only in case of Basel 4, they're actually introducing lot of what is that changes in the what is that the methodologies what is being approached in case of non-securitization. In case of securitization, Basel 2 and Basel 3 not much changes, but Basel 4 they actually replaced what is that the existing methodologies. If you have the securitization portfolio, you should definitely have a worry. And coming to the derivative portfolio, derivative always I think we need to talk about the default risk and migration risk. Again, migration risk, a new risk which has been introduced in Basel 3, and that has actually new methodology has been introduced. What is then even for the CVA computations. At least in my view, I think all the what is that Indian banks are having the default risk. Now they are obligated to go to a new methodology called SSCL, which is a bit complex. I can actually have one session on that itself, but that is a requirement which all the banks, most of the banks will be having at least forwards, right? So definitely, I think we need to look at that methodology. Market risk, all along we are talking about standardized methodology and VAR methodology. Now it's a huge change. FRTB, fundamental review of trading book, it is having not only the computational changes, even it is having a change on your the way you actually what is the do the trading desk reorganization. There are a lot of significant changes on FRTB. And operational risk also, yes, I think there is significant changes. Earlier we have very simple methodology, everyone is following the basic indicator approach. Now there is a revised standardized approach which every bank has to follow. So I believe this gives some idea. So depending upon your portfolio, you can actually assess where is the changes, whether I think you need to really worry or you need to really prepare. So this is what I think I thought of giving a high level update on the different metrics. So without getting what is that taxing your time, I want to jump on to the last two topics, the implementation challenge. This is the most important thing, theory and practice, right? I think everyone knows the theory, but practice is the most challenging thing. I want to give, I think, my views on your real challenges, what is being faced by most of the banks. Okay, maybe I think he's the CMD of a bank and he's having a lot of problem statements. Let us see what are the problems he's having it. Demystification of guidelines and assessing the business impact. This is not so much challenging, but is definitely challenging. Why I'm saying this is the Basel guidelines are in the public domain since last 3 decades. Basel BCBS has actually published a lot of explanatory notes, FAQs. They give a lot of information, consulting papers, but very few people within the bank actually understand and actually assess the impact of the business impact. That is the reason this is important aspect which banks need to consider. Okay, that is the first challenge. Now coming to the data challenge. This is the biggest challenge. It is not only for the banks, all the entities, all the what is that enterprises, they have the data challenges. The data challenges I think starts from not having the data. Even if you have the data, a lot of data gaps, data quality issues, so many issues. All along we are talking about the corporate governance. I'm saying if you want to survive in the next what is that decade or so and continue what is to be the business, you need to have a data governance in place. Without data governance in place, surviving in the market and having a what is a sustainable increase in your bottom line is going to be a real challenge. Corporate governance is important, but equally important is data governance. That's what is the data challenges. Now coming to the third one, the technology infrastructure. You can ask, I think, any CTO. He knows, I think, how challenging it is. We always say that technology should be, I think, readily available and it should be cost effective. It should be efficient. These are the 3-4 important things, I think, which a business people will go and talk to the technology person. But he knows the real challenges, how to set up a technology within the time, what is that, with the cost effective, powerful, extensible, scalable, flexible. We will use all the, I think, adjectives, whatever we know, but it's real challenge in, I think, having a right technology in the right place. Implementation timelines. This is another new area and which is getting more and more complicated as we move from the waterfall methodology of implementation to the agile methodology of implementations. We may start with any project with the assumption that we can complete within 3 months, but you may end up in having almost 3 years or so. So your entire budget will get lost within 3 months itself by defining the scope of your work itself. So this is another important thing. I think if we get into the agile methodology, the jargon itself is very confusing. You need to understand what is a sprint, what is a scrum, what is that a program increment, so many things. So this itself is becoming a science. So the implementation timelines means I think it is directly hitting your expenditure. So the internal audit and external audit, mere adopting and implementing a solution is not sufficient. Finally, you should get, I think it should be approved by your internal auditors and external auditors. They have their own challenges, right? Unless you prove that this is, I think with all the data lineage, this is actually, computing as per the rules, black boxes are not going to be accepted. So internal and external audit compliance is another challenge. You can talk to your auditors, then I think they can explain better. And a business decision supporting system. Okay, you are all, I think, implementing, you have addressed all these challenges, fine, you have computed, but unless you actually take the output of those solutions and integrate with the business, you will end up in, I think, a regulatory obligation, right? Then opportunity. That's where it is. That's where the challenge. Unless you actually use the output of these solutions and these guidelines and integrate with your business decision making, it is again, it's just a regulatory obligation that you need to take care. And ongoing regulatory changes. I can say very clearly that Basel is a journey. It's not a destination. So I told, I think, definitely I'm going to see Basel 5, touch wood, if everything goes well in the next 10 years, we are going to see the Basel 5. So the changes are dynamic, regular. So how do we actually adopt, I think, in this dynamic environment with all the changes, with all the challenges like data challenges, technology challenge, implementation challenge, in between, I think you are getting changes. How do we manage all this? These are the 5-6 important challenges any bankers will be having it. But with my experience, what I can say is I have actually analyzed some of the, I think, failed projects. Let me share my experience. I have actually analyzed some of the failed projects. If you go and assess, I think, each and every individual means, I think, for example, if I go to CRO is successful in defining his requirements. CDO, Chief Data Officer, he's fantastic. He says, I think he has done everything good. CTO, he says he is successful. And Chief Project Manager, he says he is also successful. Auditing Officer, they say they are successful, but who has failed? Bank has literally failed. Reason is there is no coordination. Means everyone actually sees the problem through their own lens. That doesn't actually work in implementing a highly functionally intensive technological solutions like Basel. It doesn't help. That is the biggest problem, I can say. Next to data challenges, not having the coordination across these different streams of work is the biggest challenge. Now, as I told, I don't want to recommend any solutions, but I want to actually give some of the high level guidance, what you should look at in the new solutions. The technology, at least in my view, now I think you need to actually pick a solution which is a product, which is given as a product as a service. And in this cloud environment, I think it's always better to go with a private cloud or a public cloud. That is always better. At least I'm saying this is just my view only. Now coming to the data management, if anyone comes and says that they are going to solve your data problem, it is absolutely a myth. No outsider can solve your data problems. Then I think what they can do is, what the technological solution can do is, it can actually assist you in identifying the data gaps, and it can actually assist you in adjusting your data in an auditable manner. It actually helps you to maintain a data dictionary. That's also very important. Means everyone should talk in the same language. That's why I think the data dictionary is another important thing. So you should actually look at the solutions which actually assist you in doing all these things. Then you can pick that solution. Now coming to the UI driven, as I told, no more black boxes, and the changes are dynamic. So business users should be in a position to carry out the changes seamlessly without depending too much on the product. So that is the reason most of your application should be the UI driven. These three are very important to comply with your BCBS 239. Unless I think you actually take a right technology and have a right data management strategy and UI based applications, complying with the BCBS 239 is more than a challenge. Data lineage. I know, I think how important it is means if you start with the report and report in a schedule and a line item, you should be knowing how this particular what is that figure in that particular report has been generated based on my input. If you can actually establish a data lineage through these solutions, whatever solution you are looking at, they should give the right data lineage. Then I think you should actually pick that solution. That is, data lineage is very important. Now coming to the attribution analysis, we are talking about the what if analysis. Fine, what if is fine. Other than that, also the CEO is always, I think, interested to know when I think there is an increase or drop in CAR ratio, whether it is good or bad. We need to know. So which has actually caused this, I think, variance in the CAR ratio. People should know CAR ratio or LCR ratio or leverage ratio, whatever may be. We need to know not only what if analysis, but what has actually caused, means which business unit is causing problem to my CAR. I think the solution should seamlessly inform the CRO. So that I think that's what is attribution analysis. You should look for a technology which is actually providing the attribution analysis as well. Reporting, I think I can't talk more than reporting. I think whether it is a MI reporting, internal reporting, or external reporting, public disclosures, publishing is fine. Reconciling all these reports is more than a challenge, right? I think we need to have a solution which actually helps you to reconcile across all these different types of report, public disclosures, regulatory reports, internal reports, management information reports. So that's how I think you try to look at any solution which is providing all these features. You can go ahead and pick those things. And again, only one thing before concluding, I want to say that Basel is a journey, not a destination. So you need to look for a solution which is scalable, flexible, and extensible. Then I think we are in the right path. That much I can say. So that's all I think from my end. I'm sorry, I think I took almost 50 minutes. Hello.
Yeah. Sir, very good morning and thank you very much. It has been a real privilege to attend your session. It was very crisp and concise, and within 45 minutes, I think it gave a lot of inputs. Just want to pick up on one of the points which you mentioned about Basel IV. You said that it will be a more of taxing on the banks which have already moved on to Foundation IRB and Advanced IRB. In fact, the very basis of these banks moving from standardized approach to these advanced approaches is that they should be able to differentiate between two exposures rather than looking at a portfolio level view which a standardized approach does. So thereby they can optimize on the credit capital required for credit calculations. So, and they have already invested too much of money in getting themselves enabled for these foundation and advanced IRBs. So with Basel IV coming in, and there are too many taxing on these kind of organization. So what should be their strategy in order to counter this, whatever Basel IV guidelines which are coming?
Okay. Sir, precise computing the capital requirement for our internal use and business decision making is always a must. Okay. Now, what I can understand from the Basel IV guidelines is the incentive or the capital advantage, whatever we are trying to achieve by moving to the advanced approaches, it is not going to be there. Why they have done it also consciously, if I did a lot of deep diving into the standardized approaches and the advanced approaches. What they have done is they have actually improved the sensitivity of your standardized approach. Now I think you need not rely upon the external factors. You need not, because standardized approach means all Indian banks will think is okay, based on the external ratings you are going to do the risk weighting, but that is not the case. For example, if you look at the US, they are not actually subscribing to any external ratings even in the standardized methodology. In the Basel IV standardized methodology, banks have been given lot of discretion to segment their portfolio. So whatever inputs you are actually going to generate by investing your money, like PD, LGD, all those things, that is going to definitely assist you in, I think, in optimizing your capital based on the standardized approach, Basel IV standardized approach itself. For example, I can take one example. For example, you have unrated exposures of the bank, exposure to other banks unrated. Now currently there is only one thumb rule in standardized approach. You need to stamp around 100% risk weight. But in Basel IV, they are saying even if it is unrated, you have discretion to segment them into 2-3 buckets. So for the segmenting, the inputs, whatever I think you are going to, what is that, generate for FIRB and AIRB, they can be utilized. But officially, capital optimization from advanced approaches and standardized approaches may not be significant. That much definitely I can say.
Thank you very much, sir. Just a follow-up question on this.
Yes.
Is it more to do with increasing regulators' concern that they are not able to establish or validate the modeling followed by the banks, so that they don't want to get into a black box situation how they are modeling these PDs and LGDs? Is it an answer to this kind of an issue?
Absolutely. And maybe in a general sense, what they told is they could not actually establish the, what is that, a comparison across the jurisdictions or within the jurisdiction, what is that, comparison of RWA. Finally, they lost the reliability on computation of RWA by different banks because they have given too much discretion in advanced approaches, and they literally failed, I think, in validating what is that, the models. Because all said and done, the models means they are bank specific and they have their own inputs. So that is the reason they actually improved the sensitivity of risky standardized approaches and put a lot of constraints on the usage of IRB approaches. You will be surprised to know they have put a lot of floors and caps on the parameters also. PD cannot be less than this, LGD cannot be less than this. Now they have gone to that level and they brought in a lot of procedural aspects, even what is that, for the PD and LGD methodologies. Lot of prescriptions. Another important thing I can say, for example, in case of public disclosures, all along we are doing the principle based reporting. Only maybe 10-15 reports you are publishing it. But in Basel IV world, they came out with a template driven what is that, reports. They're expecting you to publish at least around 70-80 reports in the public disclosures. Now, principle to prescription, I think they are leaning towards prescription. That much I can say.
Thank you, sir.
I know it is a bit of what is that, functionally intensive, and I can tone down or go to the next level depending upon your feedback in the next sessions. Whether we need sessions or not, also we can actually do it. I can actually do a deep dive into each and every slide one session, or I can say each and every component in one slide actually demands one session. That much I can say.
I think that would be a great gesture from your side, sir. This is a knowledge which I don't think it is available in the public domain, and we should all feel privileged to attend your further sessions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Knowledge should
Sir,
be
it was a brilliant presentation. We would like to hear more from you. Please do carry on the good work you are doing, and let us hear more from you and have more sessions on this topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think unless I think we keep sharing our knowledge, this is, I think we are. This is where actually I think we are. What is that? I believe risk is a culture, right? It should not be confined only to the few peoples within the bank, in the trading desk, or in the risk management department. Risk is a culture. It should be percolated down to the people who are actually creating the risk. Means I think branch people. So that level of what is that? Getting out of the jargon and making it more and more business language, and we have to create that business environment and risk environment.
Sir, this is just a very hypothetical question.
Yeah.
I don't know whether, see, one complaint about Basel is it's more about a post-mortem analysis, and it is not about prescription in nature. So is Basel ever gonna think what they can do at the time of underwriting itself? Because the very purpose of Basel is that banks should be able to meet any eventualities when it comes to meeting the bad loans. So why wait after the loan is sanctioned and then do all the calculations? So is Basel ever gonna come with some guidelines which need to be followed at the time of loan origination itself?
Loan origination itself, now I think what is that, you need to do the provisioning, right? I think IFRS guidelines is talking about even on the day of origination itself, you need to make a provision.
Provision I understand. About what will be the fate of this loan. I know there are basic guidelines like this is how provision has to be, but can it dwell little bit more on what will be the more real assessed capital required for this particular loan? Can it be more, you can say, quantitative in nature rather than being subjective?
Maybe I think at least my take is always, I think whenever I think at the time of origination, we can only make an expected loss estimation. You can do it. You can't, come to the unexpected loss portion. Whatever currently you are doing it, I think you are, already doing the capital computation based on, I think, the ratings, right? At the time of, taking any loan or any exposure, you are actually duly factoring your assessment, your appraisal, external ratings or internal ratings. You are actually taking all those things into factor at the time of deciding your pricing and even making the provision also. And even it is actually giving an indication to your unexpected loss in terms of capital, right? And maybe one thing I think they're actually, consciously moving is operational risk management. Now, I think we have been talking about operational risk management. Now they told you should think much beyond that. So it is operational risk resilience. They actually published a lot of guidelines also on that, which actually includes all the different processes. But from the credit point of view, I believe whatever they are doing is fair enough, at least in my view. That's my take.
Thank you, sir.
So one more question from me, myself, Raghu. So you have clearly pointed out that, with Basel IV, banks can no more, or, there is no more incentivization for banks to use internal models or advanced approaches. And the more emphasis will be on standardizing approach, right? Standardized approaches. So in that case, as we continuously see, banks have invested more in risk model development, risk model monitoring, maintenance, model governance, all these things. So if standardized approach have to be continued further for the greater banking stability, then where does the investments go from bank's perspective? Will it move from?
I believe I answered that. They actually, if you actually do a deep dive into standardized approach, it has been, I think, a bit, more sophistication they brought into, in standardized approach itself. So all the investments, whatever you have made, is only to generate some of the key parameters like your PD, LGD, EAD, CCF, maturity, right? Nothing more than that. All your investment has gone into getting these inputs. Now all those inputs can be actually used within the standardized approach itself for segmenting the unrated exposures. Or even I think bank may take a call, regulator may take a call and saying that they can actually do away with the external rating itself in case of standardized. US, I think, not sure whether you are aware or not, US banks, they don't follow the standard, external credit ratings within the standardized approach also. They won't follow. Regulator has taken a conscious decision. And if RBI takes that decision, even otherwise also, all the inputs, whatever you are going to generate by investing so much in the modeling, that can be utilized within the standardized approach itself. But the, standardized approach and IRB approach, the capital advantage, what you are going to gain may not be significant going forward. I'm not saying you won't get any capital advantage. You will get definitely some advantage, but it may not be significant and it may not be in sync with what the investments you already made. May not be.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Sir, Rela, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. I am having one question about this Basel IV.
Yes, sir.
Basel IV, it is IRM internal rating method is also allowed. 72.5% of outflow is allowed.
Yes.
But it should not be less than these 72.5% of the standard input.
Yes.
Suppose the bank is having a low risk assets and they are having 60% outflow, but still they have to keep 72.5% of this standardized approach.
Absolutely.
Then they are penalized. They have to bring more capital.
Absolutely.
Is there capital disadvantage is there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think in my view, I think if you see the opportunity versus regulatory, complaints, I told the going forward, the portfolio management, where you actually build your portfolio, it should be always on a constant base. You should keep checking your return on investment. We have been doing it now, but you should do it in more, I think, scientific manner.
One more question. Since it is close to forum, I am raising the question. I understand.
Yes.
I understand the sensitivity of my question. I fully aware of this. Since it is a close meeting within our friends, I am raising this question.
Yes, sir.
If it is international forum, I will not raise this.
Okay, sir.
See, the Basel 1 and Basel 2, Basel 1 OECD, they are given a special status. The OECD countries having, Greece also they were having.
Yes.
Italy is also having. What is the credit rating of those countries? But the Singapore is not there, OECD. Japan is the only Asian country was there in OECD. Okay. So after that, a lot of pressure from the political side. Basel 2, it was removed. Again in Basel 4, the outflow, the European Union wants to have more, but Federal Reserve, US wants to reduce it. So they made a compromise between this 172.5 they arrived at. Only these European Union and the Federal Reserve only is determining the entire fate of the world. What about the developing countries' voice?
Okay. Okay. Maybe I think let me answer that. So here I think BCBS guidelines are the voluntary guidelines unless and until it is adopted by the respective regulator. At the time of adoption, regulator is having its own say. I told what is that? You will be surprised. Basel II has not been adopted by US. In US, if you see, there is Basel I guidelines and directly Basel III guidelines. There is nothing called Basel II in US. Again, I told all the standardized approach, all the banks across the globe, they are actually following the external credit rating methodology as far as standardized approach is concerned. But US did not subscribe to that. Now coming to your OECD also, BCBS actually clearly gives an option to the regulator saying that you can actually follow the OECD rating or you can actually follow the ECI rating, means external credit rating agencies. You can follow. Again, they are giving both the options. It is up to the regulator. They have to take a conscious decision and they need to implement. But BCBS is giving all these options. They are voluntary guidelines, right? All said and done, BCBS and IFRS guidelines are voluntary unless otherwise it is adopted by the regulator. At the time of adoption, they need to take into consideration about their local factors and they need to do it. And all banks are doing it. I'm expecting, I think, a lot of changes this time from RBI, because RBI generally adopts as is from the BCBS. It may not be so in Basel IV. It may not be so.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any more questions?
In the chat box also. I'll read out the questions. So
Okay.
you can answer the questions. That will be great.
Okay.
The first one is if banks are moving to do a transition to expected loss calculation, do we have any rough estimate of the impact on the banks?
I think we can discuss those, I think, things maybe in a separate session.
Okay. So is there any indication that indication by Basel where other emerging risks will be part of Basel guidelines in future?
Maybe I think IRRBB, now I believe it is still in pillar 2. It may be brought to, I think, pillar 1. But for now, within pillar 1, they are only credit risk, market risk and operation risk. Might be, because I think the philosophy of, I think, Basel pillar 1, pillar 2, pillar 3 is those where they cannot actually do a standardization or an industry agreement, those risks are actually being captured in pillar 2, like your credit concentration risk, your liquidity risk, reputation risk, all those things are parked within pillar 2. As and when there is a consensus across the industry and as and when there is standardization, they will, gradually bring to pillar 1, right? For example, credit concentration risk, they actually brought in the form of large exposures. So that's how I think they will do it.
Yeah.
But
just to add to that one, so to this question, right? Basel Committee already published 2021-22 work program during April. And so in that work program, what they will do, they will take a strategic priorities for their next upcoming policies. And this is one of the themes. So where they want to assess, measure, and work on mitigation of the climate related financial risk also. So that means it's there in their theme in upcoming years. Okay, so then if banks are pushed to a standardized approach, how banks will be motivated to be more risk sophisticated and differentiated?
That's what I think. The Basel IV standardized approach is not a, what is that, a rule based one. Even within even within the unrated exposures, banks are required to segment their portfolios. You will be surprised. The corporate exposures, there is a lot of, I think, complexity they brought in. They brought in all the IRB concepts within the corporate. Means within the corporate itself, the specialized lending concept has been brought in. Object finance, project finance, commodity finance, everything has been brought in as a part of what is that, the corporate assets within standardization. Even we are required to differentiate the SME and non-SME within corporate. That is not there in B3. So B3 to B4, they actually enhanced the complexity of standardized approach and put a lot of constraints on the advanced approaches. And in the advanced approaches, they put a lot of even floors, caps, even parameter procedures, so many constraints. We need, I think, they are expecting more and more sophistication within standardized approach. That's how I think we need to understand.
Yeah, there are two questions which are interrelated. So, what is your view about S Bank and LVB issues from Basel perspective? Then there is one more question related to the same thing. Last year, additional Tier 1 bonds of S Bank were written off by RBI. Then, in that scenario, what is the sanctity of these additional Tier 1 bonds for banks in India?
Okay, maybe I think I'm not much well versed with the banks in India per se, because all along, I think since last 10 years, I'm working, either in Australia or in US, though I'm supporting, I think, multiple banks within India. I really don't know, I think, the details, I think, how LBV has failed and who has taken over and Yes Bank issues. So I can't comment on that. What is the second question you told?
Yeah, it's a similar thing. So S Bank, so RBI has written up additional Tier 1 bonds of the S Bank.
Okay.
So in this case, so what is the sanctity of additional Tier 1 bonds for banks in India?
Maybe I think I can't comment on that, because without knowing, I think, the real details, yeah, I don't have awareness about those things. I'm sorry.
Okay. So yeah, in US, you already mentioned that US is still in US GAAP for accounting norms. It's not shifted to IFRS. So is there any specific reasons from the Fed perspective or US?
Oh, I think they feel, I think US, what is that? I told you, right? I think Basel II has not been adopted by the US. US is having only Basel I and Basel III. That is, they feel, I think, whatever US Fed is, US GAAP is, I think, more comprehensive. So they want to continue with their own, methodologies of accounting language. It is the regulator discussion. We can't challenge.
Yeah. So when we say Basel is a journey, so what could be the starting point for an implementation perspective? Is it like understanding the journals or consulting paper? But for an implementation, what is the starting point for the where banks should look upon?
Absolutely. I think this is because your data is the most important thing, whether it is a complex bank or a small bank or anything else. Understand the data. I think how your data is actually stored, how you are governing the data, how you are provisioning the data. That's where I think your energy should get into that. That is the first important point. The second thing is look at your balance sheet and understand your complexity of the portfolio. So in my view, this is, I'm telling, I think, with all my practical experience of implementing solutions, no Basel application should take more than 90 days in implementing. Not more than 90 days. But the reality is it is actually slogging for years together. The reason why it is happening is we are getting lost in the weeds. Maybe 95% of your portfolio is, I think, the simple portfolio, you can actually process and report it. Everything can be done. For the remaining 5%, there I think people are actually getting lost. So, and we are losing the time. So I think if you remember, I think the slide which I have put it on the, the real challenges, if you can come out with a clear strategy, how you are going to address one by one, and how you are going to ensure the coordination across these, I think, different work streams, like your business team, data team, and technology team, and project management team, and audit team, I'm sure, I think it is not going to be a challenge. And while selecting the technology also, don't go by the brand names. Don't go by the brand names, and look at the features what you want. So depending upon that, if you can actually take a conscious decision, I think you can very well do it. And I can say one thing: you need to build internal expertise. In-house expertise is definitely required. If you start depending on external expertise, it's difficult, because earlier I was wearing that hat. I know, I think, how to manage. So internal expertise is definitely required.
Okay, so
Cost effective.
yes, thanks for answering those questions.
So any other questions?
Yeah, we have two more questions. So what about business dependencies on identifying the connected counterparties? If two counterparties are connected, then how will you establish the business dependencies on between those two? And
Maybe
if
if
we do that,
people are interested, I can actually have a session on the connected clients itself, because that's a really interesting topic. We need to actually understand how to establish connectedness between two parties, duly factoring the accounting consolidation, control relationship, and economic interdependence. We can have a separate session on that. I can actually conduct a session on the connected clients. Very, very complex, very, very challenging. Most challenging, I can say.
yeah. So we have one last question. So this is related to large exposure metric. It's a specific question. Whether we can use a beta factor to understand the inverse or linear correlation between two counterparties.
Okay, maybe I think I will cover this also during that connected clients, because it's a part of large exposures only. I will explain that.
Yeah, there is one more question. So how will IBOR transition will impacting existing bank risk models?
Oh, that I think I'm sorry. I think I don't have much understanding about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we are done with our questions. So anybody has any question they can ask. What are the books for beginners on Basel? Would you like to suggest any books for the beginners to understand Basel?
I think because I told, right, in Basel is it's a practitioner's view only. I think the more I think you get lost in what is the books. I have one. I think I read only one book, but most of the time I actually spent time in reading the BCBS documents itself. Don't straight away start reading the BCBS. The final rule. Final rule will be really complicated. But when you start actually the explanatory notes and the consulting papers which is being published by BCBS, you will actually understand. That type of information you will not find in any books, any authorized books. Maybe I think I can say one thing. I think myself and Ramesh, we are actually in the process of, I think, publishing a book from the practitioner's point of view. I think we understood, I think, the complexity, and we learned, I think, all these things in a very hard manner. So we want to actually translate all our knowledge, and we want to put in a very simplified, I think, business friendly, the Basel demystification practitioner's view. We are planning to publish by this year end. But I definitely suggest go to the BCBS site and read the consultation papers, explained in notes, and FAQ. Only after that read the final rule. Otherwise, you will get lost.
So that was the next question. So where can we find the consulting paper? So you answered that one. But BCBS website, we can see final rule, but consulting papers,
No.
Finding it difficult. But okay, so there are consulting papers on BCBS.
Absolutely. On each and every topic, there will be consultation. Even you need to understand, even RBI will not come out directly with the final rule. They will come out with consultation, and lot of, I think, feedback will go from the industry experts. Read those things. Then I think you will understand. Otherwise, it's a bit dry area, right? Unless you have real interest, it's difficult to digest and understand. But read the
next question is related to the large exposure. Is there any difference between large exposure guidance and CRILC reporting norms followed by RBI?
Okay, I think what is that CRILC? I don't know, because I'm not much familiar with the jurisdictional guidelines.
We can cover this question maybe if we are having a large exposure. So if we can cover this for multiple jurisdiction for related guidelines, then there could be answer for this question.
Okay. I can include this topic there while addressing the large exposure at large.
Similar question, any books you want to specify for regulatory reporting?
Again, I'm telling, I think always read the, even for reporting also, I think read the consultation papers from BCBS. All other reports, whatever is being designed by the respective regulators, the parent guideline is BCBS guidelines, and BCBS will not publish any guidelines without consultation, without FAQs, without explanatory notes. Read those things, they are the real source of truth. And it actually gives the real insight why a guideline has come into place also.
Okay, so thanks for answering all the questions. So we are done with all the questions.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for, I think I definitely say sincere thanks to all you. Attending a session, taxing your time on Saturdays, that in the evenings, it's very, very painful. I hope, I think I paid you, I think with some quality information. Give me the feedback. Accordingly, I can actually, what is that, tailor, I think, my next sessions if required. Thank you. Over to
Yeah, thanks, Sam. The participants today, as you rightly said, that weekend evening, prime time with the family, but still they are attending, means how they are serious about this subject, how they love to learn all these things. At the same time, I want to pass on the same remark on this. Today, early morning, you are getting up and you are setting up all the things. Ralla, Srinivasala, we are very thankful to you. And actually, the participants have given the feedback. Already they have given the feedback. They are very happy about your session. They want to have further session. They want to learn from you. I will tell you that why we should have the session like this. That, as you said, that rightly said, that for the last 30 years, tons of papers are available in the website of BIS. As I am teaching that, I have gone through all the Basel, all the reports I have given, in the classes I am explaining, but still, how much trouble I have taken it. I'm working for a bank, but in Dubai. So whenever I'm having a doubt, I will go and sit with the department. I will see the hands-on experience, what they are doing, that I will explain. Otherwise, the reading the notes alone will not help. Practice is very important. So that way, Rella has touched all the points, and whenever this much only it can be done, because it's a big ocean. And the slide, he has given a good summary. That is good handy, and how the 1, 2, 3, 4 as evolution happened. That is very good. IFRS 9 he touched, and the provision, and that is the output of IFRS provision and input for that's very good quote. And Basel 1, 2, 3, 4 operations. So all the points he touched. And having touched all these serious notes, I want to end up with this very light note. Sir, you said the challenges in Basel. The challenges as Basel is applicable to household also.
Absolutely.
Today morning, I went to buy the vegetable and the groceries for my family. At the time only, I scribbled something on my mobile. At the time when I go there, the data was very much confusing. She was rising. At the time only, rice means raw rice or boiled rice. Then when I was saying the raw rice, something I took decision, and there is so many varieties are there, so many data problems. So when I scribbled something, my mobile phone battery was out. Technology trouble, technology challenges. By the time COVID is there, restriction is there, they are going to close down the shop. Within that, I have to finish the timeline challenges. Finally, when I'm coming there, when they are giving the notes, how much I spent and all these things, reporting problem, again challenges. So this challenge is not only applicable to Basel, it is applicable everywhere. So the data is very important. Data challenge is very important. That's very nice. So with that note, we conclude. We will have the further session of also. So many other series also we are going to have. We are going to have this central banking digital currency. We are going to have LIBOR transition. Somebody is asking LIBOR transition. We are thinking of, and we are going to have this on corporate governance. One by one, it is coming. 2 hours back, we have started with the blockchain. So last month only we started this forum. So we are working on that. Please support, please be with us. And thanks once again, thanks Rella for your support and Ramesh for your help in the question and answer session. I thank everyone for the participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.